podcast where I, Sean, embark on a journey to understand what's happening in my own head. Spoiler alert, I have no clue, but that's precisely why we're here. In each episode, I explore questions about the brain that I believe will resonate with all of us. Like, why can't I turn my brain off at 3 a.m.? Why my memory only works when it feels like it? And why my brain seems to betray me when I need it most. Listen, I'm not a scientist. I'm no expert. I'm just a guy looking to unravel the mysteries of my own mind. Fortunately, I happen to know a cognitive neuroscientist who is an expert in the brain, and I get to ask him all the questions I want. So, if you're curious, confused, or simply along for the ride, welcome. And hey, if you like what you hear, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to the podcast, or whatever it is you do wherever you listen to podcasts. I don't know how the algorithms work. I just know that your support keeps this journey moving forward. And together, we might just discover something remarkable. This is John Teaches Sean about his brain. Let's get started. Hi, John. It's good to see you.
Hey, Sean. Good seeing you.
What is on your mind this week?
Well, this week, so I was thinking back about some of our past episodes.
Okay.
And in one of our episodes, I had a plan to ask you a question the next episode. And I forgot to ask you the question. And ironically, the question was about memory. And I forgot. But like, how many episodes ago do you know, do we do the brain hack? Was that like 3 episodes ago or so, 3 or 4?
The memory hacks?
Memory hacks, I mean, yes.
3 or 4 episodes ago.
So it's been close to a month.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about the peg word system.
Yes.
And we came up with five words attached to pictures. And I meant to ask you the next week, so a week later, do you remember the 5 words?
I do, yeah.
But I'm going to ask you a month later. You really do?
Yeah.
I tried to think of them and I couldn't. But see, I use the peg word brain hack fairly regularly. Like if I go to the store or if I'm trying to remember something. So I keep replacing the pictures of like the horse and the chariot over and over. So just so then it's hard for me to remember what the last picture was. It can get replaced. But just for new listeners, or if listeners haven't heard this, go listen to the memory hack episode because it tells you how to remember lists of things really easily. But this is a peg word where you have pictures in your mind and then you hang the word on the peg or you put it in the picture. So will you just run through those 5 real quick?
Sure, but I'm going to tell you, this is yet another example that people are not going to believe when I say this, that you and I didn't prearrange this. We did not discuss this. John, I used this yesterday. I used it yesterday.
You used it yesterday? But
I absolutely did.
Okay. So I have 2 questions on that. One, I want to know how you used it.
Yeah.
And the second one is I'm worried that what you used yesterday might have replaced what you used 4 weeks ago.
Well, if you're asking, so if I'm understanding you right, if you're asking if I remember the words that I was using attached to peg words, I don't know if I remember those. Oh, because okay. I've used this several times since then.
Okay. Okay.
So here's the long answer to that, as with everything with me. But I go to the store generally. My wife is working during the day, and I will go to the grocery store if we need something from the store. Normally, she will write me a list of what she wants, and then I go to the store and use the list. So I've been trying, if it's a list of, 5 to 7 items on the list, I've been trying to, there's been some strikes and gutters in this process, because what I've been trying to do is I'll take the list, I try the peg word system with the list, and then I will leave the list at home. And so that's where I'm at now. Initially, I would get in the truck, I would drive to the store, I would leave the list in the truck. So if I really had to go, if I really forgot something on the list, I would go back out to the truck as punishment for forgetting, and then look at the list. And one time I was so frustrated, I brought the list back in the store with me. But anyway, right now I look at the list, I do the peg word, and then I leave the list at home. And that has resulted in me having to call home and asking about an item on the list.
I gave you a list. Why are you
I know, my poor wife. In more ways than one. But, these things that I do these experiments, I guess, my bro science experiments here. But I, in all honesty, been using that process a lot just to see if I can. And so yesterday, left the list at home and went to the store and remembered. Now, there were only 5 items on the list, so it's not that big of a deal. But so but let me try. Hang on.
Try it.
So 1 run. Okay, so I think it was coffee cups or coffee mug or cup, because I can see cups falling out of the chariot.
Okay.
2 zoo was lamp, because I can see 2 gorillas fighting over a lamp.
So was it light bulbs you needed, or?
No. I'm saying this was from the episode.
Oh, from the episode.
I'm pretty sure one was...
Got it.
1 was coffee cup, 2 was lamp. 3...
Yeah, I thought this was your list from yesterday.
No. 3 tree. This is from a month ago. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering what I said a month ago.
Yeah. 3, I think, is the only one I do remember, but I want to hear yours.
Okay, hang on. 3 tree. So that was pen. I can see pens hanging out of the tree.
I remember
4. No, did we only do 3 or did we do 5?
No, we did 5.
Okay, 4. Oh no, what's 4?
4 door.
Yeah. But let me come back to 4 door. But 5 hive was flag.
Oh yeah, that's right.
4,
I remember lamp now. I remember flag. I already knew pen.
Pen was 3.
I don't remember coffee cups.
Yeah,
I kind of do.
There were. I can picture coffee cups spilling out of the chariot being pulled by horses. Mm-hmm. But 4 door. What did I see for a door? Oh no, I can't remember 4.
I always picture those revolving doors like at hotels that
and something stuck in the door.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what is stuck in the door.
Okay, I can't believe you remembered 4 of the 5.
I remembered 4 out of 5 things from a month ago using that peg word.
But if you hadn't been using it, you probably would have remembered all 5.
Yeah.
Because that picture, once you associate them, you're going, oh yeah, I remember that picture. But if you've been using it, then of course it gets replaced.
Yeah.
So that's amazing that you remember
4 out of 5 is
pretty.
That's freaking me out a little bit. That's way better than I expected to do.
That is amazing. Yeah. So
not knowing you were going to ask me that.
No, I just
man,
decided to ask that this morning, right before we started.
4 door. Anyway, I got to go back and listen to that episode.
Go back and listen.
Yeah, and figure out what 4 was.
Yeah, but I just think that's just amazing what our brains can do when you associate things and then they stick and you can remember that. It's really cool.
It's been working for me.
Good.
It really has. Good. So, okay, podcast over. Sean's got a victory for today.
Yes, let's stop while we're ahead.
So, I, in all sincerity, if I can switch gears for a second, because another thing is, and I think you know this about me, but movies and TV shows are a big deal in my life. That sounds weird, but I just, my first job was at a movie theater. And then when I left the movie theater, I got a job at a movie store, which most people, if you're young enough, probably don't have any idea what that is. But there was a time where you used to drive to a store and rent a, well, in the beginning there was VHS tapes. This is really back, but then you could go rent a DVD and then a Blu-ray, and obviously those went out of business. But I worked at a movie theater, I worked at a movie rental place, like I just, and even beyond that, movies have always been a thing for me, and TV shows. That's my enjoyment. But my wife and I, with the now fast forward to old man Sean can watch streaming, and because there was also a time with TV shows that you had to wait a week to see an episode.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, and the only way to ingest that entertainment, that information, was every Friday night at 8 o'clock or whatever.
And you had to be there.
And you had to be there.
VHS set to record it, which was a pain.
Yeah, which was really hard to do, and it was a pain, and so you had to be sitting in front of the TV. Anyway, not the overall point, but now we have the ability to binge TV shows where I can sit down and watch an entire season or many seasons or whatever. So my wife and I are watching a TV show, and I notice that I annoyed isn't the right word, but I know what's going to happen. If I've watched 5 seasons of a series, for the most part, I'm like, okay, I know what's going to happen. I know what the finale is going to be. I know what the arc's going to be with these characters, because there's this pattern every season that I just go, and so I have to kind of step away from it, because I find myself just going like, it's just the same thing. You can plug different characters in, but it's the same thing. And I realized yesterday, when I was kind of getting annoyed with a particular TV show, that, and I don't know that the writer, the producer, or whoever made the show knows what you know about the brain, but I think that from the brain standpoint, like, we're satisfied for the most part with a pattern. The brain kind of, I don't know if it likes patterns. I don't know how to say it. You would maybe, but that's my whole thing is. And then one final thought. I know this is a rambling intro to this, but I'm really interested in how movies and television shows, and maybe there's other mediums of entertainment, but they are pleasing to my brain because they have a pattern that is familiar to me. But on the same note, on the flip side of that same coin, is it also annoys me because I have this little thing of like the pattern. So the final thing that I'm really interested to get your take on all this, but is in movies, at least people who are into movies, like nerds like me, but the movies we tend to talk about are the ones that take the pattern and break it a little bit, right? We call it a twist ending. But they're in movies, in storytelling, because we've talked about storytelling, there's the hero's journey, there's the MacGuffin, there's the Chekhov's gun. There's all these terms that they use to describe like storytelling. But when someone, and so a couple that come to mind, I'm sure that if you haven't seen it, you've heard of the movie The Sixth Sense. Right. And it's over 20 years old, so it's not a spoiler anymore. But the idea that that it has the twist ending, Fight Club, twist ending. But what it really, for me, what I'm learning through these, even just a few episodes talking to you about the brain, is that what it really is they're taking a pattern and they're playing with the pattern, doing something that you don't expect. Is all that making sense?
Yeah.
Am I even
perfect sense
close to talking about what I'm feeling?
Yeah, I think I've heard that there's like 8 or 9 storylines that every movie follows. So there's like a quest, there's a hero, there's 8. So those are the patterns. And then you're right. The movies that we talk about the most probably are the ones that break the pattern, or the most disturbing. Sometimes we talk about them because we don't like it when a pattern is broken. Like
exactly what I'm talking about. Yes.
Yeah. It's like that. I don't like that. I didn't like how that ended, or I didn't like how that turned out because it didn't meet our expectations. So patterns are what give us expectations. So,
okay.
So it's a way that we see this arrangement. We expect it to always be like this. And that's a pattern. So yeah, when you're talking about that, that may be one of the the most common things that all brains do. Human and non-human brains are they're just these massive pattern detection systems. And that's
Okay.
one way to look at the brain and understand it, is based on pattern detection. A lot of philosophers and neuroscientists have put that as one of the top uh, jobs, one of the top things that the brain does, is to break down patterns and understand patterns. And
So go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead if you have a question about it.
Well, I do about patterns. So is it similar? I'm assuming it's similar to what we've talked about with schemas. Is your brain learns those patterns?
Yeah, so this might be good to start with this. All the concepts we talk about, like schemas, attention, memory, emotions, they all overlap, and patterns overlap through all of those. So when, with schemas, we've talked about like biases related to schemas and stereotypes. Those
Hmm.
are patterns as well. We have a pattern we expect people from certain groups to do certain things in our mind. That's a stereotype, but that's also a pattern. So all of these overlap each other. It's different ways to try to look at and understand our brain and how it works. It's just different. Like it's like it's a sunset, and you can talk about it in different ways. You can talk about its aesthetic beauty. You can talk about its physical components like the wavelengths of light. You can talk about it a lot of different ways, but it's still a sunset. So we can talk about the brain a lot of different ways to try to understand it and describe it, but it's still the brain and what we do. But patterns are a great way to describe it. And when you asked if that's something our brain does, one of the things I always like to do when I'm looking at a new topic with the brain and and reading about the brain in some way that it's being described, is to say, is 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 this something that is in the natural world? And if so, is this something that's in the natural world that our brain is picking up on and processing? Or is there something in the natural world for our brain to pick up and process? And in both cases, like, yes, patterns are in the world, and yes, our brain's built to process them. It's kind of like saying, if you could take a map of the US and filter out everything except just our roads, the road system, you could tell where population centers are. You could tell where the cities are, because all of a sudden there's a lot more roads. And so you can say, well, that pattern of more roads is because there's more people. But you can also say, because there's a lot of people in this area, they need more roads. So, but those two kind of go together. And so our pattern recognition system and patterns in the world go together in that sense. It's like we need a system to recognize that. And um, if you think about, I can't remember where it was I read this, and it's been a couple 3 months ago, probably, maybe a little bit longer. I think it might have been at the website The Big Think, but I'm not sure. But it was talking about different patterns in the world, and the most common pattern is the spiral. So if you can picture a seashell, and it has the lines that start at one end and kind of go out and they spiral out away from it. Our galaxy spirals away. Pine cones spiral away from. So that's like a really common pattern.
Hmm.
Um, Symmetry is another pattern, like mirrored systems, like butterfly wings, flower petals, uh, like spider webs, those types of things. So, and shapes will repeat, like in a honeycomb. Those are patterns that you can see that bees, when they're making the honeycomb, there's stripes and spots on like zebras and leopards. There are patterns. So those are patterns in nature, and they're everywhere. And so if that's so common in nature, then you would expect our brain to have a system to detect that, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. Yeah.
So that's one type, but then there's also that's kind of like patterns from the physical and the biological universe that kind of they reveal the inherent kind of beauty and order of the world and of the natural world. But then there's other types of patterns as well, like math is full of patterns and number patterns that you can go through. And there's equations, and there's even equations and formulas to describe patterns, like the patterns we were talking about in nature. You can come up with the formulas to describe those patterns. Language, almost all it is patterns. There's speech patterns with phonemes that you have to pick up, and there's certain patterns of how those phonemes are put together. The symbols of your alphabet, those are patterns so that you can read. Um, our behavioral patterns are huge. So, like, um, I think we talked about recently in conditioning how you have like rewards and punishment. But if you're looking at rewards, if they're on some type of fixed schedule, like a fixed number, like if you I always just, when I'm talking about conditioning, fall back to the rat pressing the bar, because that's one of the easiest things to talk about. But you could say you get a treat after every 10th bar press. And so rats will pick up on that pattern very quickly and just wait till they're ready, and then just just punch the bar until a pellet comes out and they eat it, and then they explore the pen or whatever, and then they come back. Or you can do it by time. After 30 seconds, it doesn't matter if you press the bar 100 times or none. Once you press it after 30 seconds, you get it. That's a pattern, and they pick up on it so fast. If you hand an iPad to a 3-year-old, they figure that out so quickly, even probably faster than I would figure it out, because their brain is looking for patterns on how things work and operate. But also, if you're thinking about patterns of people's behaviors, like if you're talking to somebody and they start to fidget or look around, or maybe they clench their jaw, you can tell they're starting to get agitated. And then maybe you see the pattern of like the cheeks start to flush a little bit, get red, and you think, oh, they might be getting angry. I mean, those are patterns you can pick up on. And you being a police officer, you could probably tell when things were starting to escalate, right?
Yes. And it's funny that you said that part, because I was thinking back to a group of people at an event or something. There's a lot of people, and they're all behaving kind of a certain way. They look a certain way, behave a certain way, and then there's one person that is standing out because they're behaving differently, doing something.
Mm-hmm.
So it breaks the pattern and draws kind of puts a spotlight on them from a law enforcement standpoint. That's what you're looking for, is the person or people who are breaking the pattern.
Yeah. So like in movies, since you're talking about movies, if there's like the bad guy is a shooter or something in like an airport or somewhere where there's a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
and they shoot and everybody screams and starts running, and then you see one guy with like a hat on walking the other way slowly. And I think movies do that so that it's easy for the viewer to pick out the bad guy. But I would think if it was a smart bad guy, they would kind of run with everybody and look around too, like what's going on, and kind of play along with it.
Yeah.
But that's an easy way for the movies to show there's the bad guy, because man, you pick up on that so quickly. It's like everything's moving one way and one person slowly walking. It just breaks the pattern, like you said.
So when you say you pick up on it quickly, another thought that occurred is I'm assuming that the back channel picks up on this way faster than the on channel does. Is that accurate?
Yes.
As with everything that we talk about, the back channel is so much faster than the on channel and these things. So is there, and I think I know the answer to the question before I ask it, but are there times where the on channel has to come up with the reason, where it goes, oh, I know what's going on, but the back channel has already spotted the pattern, identified whatever's out of,
Mm-hmm.
outside of the expected norm for that situation.
Yeah. The example of the shooter walking slowly away might not be the best example to answer your question, but it would be think of it as your back channel is, as it takes in information, it's looking for patterns. And so if patterns are matching what it's expecting, then it keeps running and just testing more and everything's okay. But once something doesn't match, it's like, I mean, it depends on how off it is, but it's kind of like an alarm bell sounds like, hey, this isn't matching up. This isn't what was expected. And that alarm bell can be in the form of, all of a sudden you start to feel kind of uncomfortable and you're not sure why. And you kind of start looking around and maybe, let's just say that you're walking to your car at night and all of a sudden the hair on the back of your neck starts to stand up and you get this feeling in your gut and you go, what is that? And you start looking around on all sides, like, is somebody out here? So now your on channel is trying to interpret that feeling and go, there must be somebody hiding in the bushes or sneaking behind me, or somebody's watching me. But that might not be why your back channel sounded the alarm. It might have been something like, hey, our car is not where, like, it's looking for a pattern, the car's not there, and it might send the alarm bell. Like, maybe that wouldn't make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, but it's that feeling like something's not right here. And so you're going, oh, there must be somebody around me. That could be bad, but it might be something else that's causing that right. feeling.
But your on channel's left to try to decipher why you're feeling that way. And it'll come up with the closest guess that it can.
Yeah, or if a stick snaps, then your on channel can also hear that, and you start to feel uncomfortable. Plus, you heard that. Now you're going, there's somebody over there. So then it would be right, probably.
Right.
But if it doesn't pick something, your on channel's still going to try to find the answer to it, and it might be totally incorrect.
Yeah, but in my case, going back to my original question, is if I'm having the feeling where I'm not enjoying this TV show at the moment, I'm getting, and my on channel just goes, yeah, I don't like that character, or I don't like what's happening. And what's really happening is that a pattern is emerging the same as the last 4 seasons. And I'm going, I see the pattern, and it's this is, but again, my on channel maybe in this case doesn't fully recognize that. I think that it was a conversation you and I had. I don't think that we talked about it on this podcast, and maybe I'm misapplying this story, but you were talking about, maybe it was the podcast, but anyway, you and I, let's just rehash it, are walking, we're going to go have dinner. We're walking to the restaurant. We're getting ready to cross the street. The restaurant has a particular layout, the lighting, the shrubbery, the way that it's laid out there's a pattern there, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That
yes.
Again, the on channel might not go, oh, look at where the lights are, but the back channel sees it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're walking, and as we're going across the street, a car nearly hits me. Like the side view mirror is just, I can feel the wind from it. That's that close. It scares me. And we step back. And months later, you and I are going to go to dinner at a completely different restaurant. And as we get to the restaurant and I look at it, my back channel goes, those lights, the shrubbery, all of that reminds, and I go, I have heard bad things about this restaurant. I don't want to go there. But do you remember you and I talking about this?
Yes,
Not that story happened. I'm saying you told me the story about the brain, but that's an example of my brain recognizing a similar pattern, not even the same pattern,
mm-hmm.
but it's similar enough
mm-hmm.
that my on channel goes, yeah, it's got to be. We heard bad stuff. They don't have good food in there, or the service sucks, or whatever it is.
Yeah, because if you get like a feeling like, I don't want to go here, because your back channel might be saying, this is where danger is. If we try to cross the road to go to this restaurant, there's so many patterns that are matching that time we almost got hit. Let's just stay away from crossing this road for survival purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But then that feeling of, let's not go there, your on channel is trying to figure out why. And you're going, I think I've heard some bad things about this place. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's because of the patterns.
Yeah, the brain picked up a pattern and associated it with something negative, in this case, danger,
Hmm.
and we don't go to the restaurant.
And that's why, like, people recovering from drugs, for example, if they go back to their old neighborhood, it's almost impossible for them to stay clean, because those patterns of how things look, how buildings look, the people they see, all that just helps their back channel fit right into all the habits and all the things. It just starts automatically pushing them to do the certain things that they've always done, because this is, when we're in this neighborhood, this area, this is what we do, and these are the expected behaviors, and that those are all patterns. And so people are more successful if they go to a new area, because there haven't been those patterns and habits created of what you see and what you expect.
So wow, yeah, wow, okay. I didn't even think about this, but for an addict, a former addict trying to recover, they're in recovery,
Hmm.
but they go home,
Hmm.
and the street that they drive down, or the they run into somebody, all of those things, there's associations in the back channel, there's patterns
Hmm.
that once the back channel picks it up, pushes those urges forward, whatever the behavior was to use.
And interacting with people is probably even a stronger signal of patterns, because not only do you have your all of your background and your experiences with that person, and you have your expectations of what that person's going to do, but you also at some level understand that that person has expectations of you. And it's why, even after people, like, if, like, let's say you're 21 years old, you get married and leave home and move across the country, and so you very rarely see your family. But when you do travel back to see your family, even if it's 10 years later, now you're in your 30s, 10 or 15 years, and you travel back, it's so easy to fall into those roles that you grew up with in, like as the little brother, or as the goof off that always does things, or the one, and then everybody around you has those expectations of you. And even if you think, I'm going to try to I'm going to try not to be the goof off this time, or I'm going to try to present myself as more serious so people will take me more seriously. When you get there, it's extremely difficult. It takes a lot of practice to be able to do that, because you fall right back into what everybody else is expecting of you. And your body's reading that, your back channel's reading that, and it's pushing forward those urges and impulses to have you act and behave in a way that's everybody else expects and is accepting from everybody else, so you fit right back into that group really easily.
Yeah.
So it's hard. And then when you do start to change, everybody's like, what's his problem? What's wrong with him? What's he trying to do? Is he high on his horse now? Like, what's
Yeah.
going on? And so you get those vibes too, and it can be really difficult.
Yeah, hard. I'm thinking about, as an adult with a family, you go home to your parent or parents' house,
Mhm.
and you get treated like and act like a little kid
Yeah.
sometimes, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying all the time, but it's easy, from what I'm hearing you say, is to just
And
fall back into the pattern.
and as the baby boy with three older sisters, I kind of like that pattern, to be honest with you.
Okay,
That
but
was nice for to go back. Like, I don't want
yeah,
to change this.
but especially if you go back and they're still in the house you grew up in,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? That yeah, this is that's. And I was just thinking about I think maybe not a easier example, but I was thinking about, if you're from a part of the country that they have a particular accent,
Hmm.
and but you move away, right? And you're gone for 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is, and wherever you move to, um, they don't have that accent, so the accent drops off, right? But then
Hmm.
they go
Hmm.
home, and they're home for, I mean, I don't know how long, 30 minutes, an hour, and the accent back immediately
Right back.
and
I've got
strong.
Yeah, I've got a great story. So Casey grew up in North Carolina, and I grew up in Kansas, and she had a southern accent, which I loved. and that drawing, she said, "Hey y'all, how's it going?" That type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And so we got married. So she left North Carolina for college. Then we got married and moved to Nevada, and then to Minnesota. We were in Kansas for a while, lived in Kansas, then Nevada, then Minnesota, and it was in Nevada after we'd first been married, and she started losing her accent a little bit because she wasn't around people that were speaking with a Southern accent,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't notice she was losing it. Because she still had like a little hint, but it's gradual. So I
Right.
didn't notice she was losing it until like one day I came home from school and she said, "Hey, I didn't expect you this," or something. It was like a really Southern accent. And I like stopped because it was out of character from what I'd been expecting. And I was like, I didn't know if she was like joking or trying to, but she just kept talking. And I found out a little bit later she had talked to her mom on the phone a little bit earlier. And so after that, when I would come back and I would notice her Southern accent, I would just say, kind of throw in, "Did you talk to your mom today?" Yeah, she called me at 5 o'clock or whatever. And so
Yeah.
I could always tell when she had talked to family because her accent would come back, and it wasn't
Yeah.
purposeful on her part. It's just that was that familiar pattern that she would get, and because it's not just the accent; it's kind of the rhythm of talk, and if you're going to fall into that rhythm, that the accent kind of comes with it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
But
that's a great example.
that's that pattern again that you go right back to what you did for however long. But
Hmm.
what's interesting to me is how quickly you just had describing that, just talking on the phone for
Yeah,
however long, and it's back strong,
yeah, yep.
and then fades again, but it's right back. That part
And
always interests me.
and now she's been gone so long that now she can talk to her family. I don't notice. I can't tell.
Oh,
It was right after we had moved and she was starting to lose it, and which is on one hand kind of disappointing. I loved the Southern accent. I loved when she would talk like that. So, but it's just how you start adapting. And I hear people say, "Oh, that person's trying to act all cool because they moved over to the UK. Now they're talking with a British accent, trying to be cool." And it's like they can't
that's
help it.
that's not how
Like
this works.
Madonna, I think was one of them where people were really mad at her. Like she's trying to act all uppity because she has a British accent. I'm like, yeah, she lives there. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't live someplace and not that doesn't rub off on you. So yeah, our kids when we moved to Minnesota,
Oh
they
boy.
it it
Easy now.
they
Easy.
they never did pledge allegiance to the flag, but they came close. But no, you could start to hear, oh yeah, it's kind of
Oh
the
yeah,
Minnesota. Oh
sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
sure. Like the
up there, the lake there. You see.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Oh, these are my people, John. This is where
I
I'm. This
know. I
is
love it. I loved
Uh,
it.
stop it.
That's not a bad thing.
My wife. She's been around my family enough. She does a pretty good Minnesota accent. So, uh, but yeah, the I when I would go back and visit because that's I hear it enough, and I didn't notice it when I was younger. When I would come back to Washington after Minnesota, how long it took for that accent to fade
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
But like you said, on the phone or go back or they come and visit, and you're right back to that pattern again
Yeah,
of talking.
yeah, exactly. And but it's important. Patterns are so important because it's our it's our brain's ability to recognize regularities in the
Mm,
information it picks up. So as it's pulling in this sensory stuff, it recognizes the regularities of things that are expected, which I think we've done this before with when we've talked about schemas, but the same thing with patterns. If you tried to get up in the morning and go have a cup of coffee, let's just say you get up and go straight into the kitchen to start the coffee before you do anything else, there's so many you're relying on so many patterns just to do that. So like first of all you're looking at the lights, the pattern of lights on your phone or your watch, or you're looking at dials on a clock to understand if it's time to get up. So you have to see that pattern, or because sometimes you wake up and start to get up and you go, oh, it's 3:30, yeah, I'm going to go back to sleep for a little bit. So you have to recognize a pattern. If you should get up, then there's a pattern of clothes that you wear, like if you put on some sweats or a t-shirt or throw on a house like a robe or something like that. Then another type of pattern is a mental map. So you have a mental map of your house so that you don't wander through it, all the different rooms looking for the kitchen. You know exactly how to get to the kitchen without even thinking about it because that pattern is there. And then if you run into somebody on your way, there's facial patterns that your brain picks up to recognize, is that a spouse or a significant other or a child? Or if you don't recognize a pattern, that's not good because that means somebody's in your house that probably shouldn't be there. So that's not good. But and then if they talk to you to say, hey, good morning or whatever, you have to decode those sounds, those patterns of sound to know what they've said. So it's just almost everything we do includes patterns to understand how we're supposed to maneuver through our world just to go get a cup of coffee.
So I'm now, because you brought up schemas. So two things. I do understand that all of these things that we're talking about overlap.
Yes.
It seems like it's really hard to take the brain and just take one thing the brain does and dissect that because there's all this overlap. So I am starting to understand that part. But the patterns, I'm getting a little bit the water's getting a little murky around patterns and schemas because what I started to think I understood about schemas, some of those might be patterns. In other words, the clock. Let's just say, because I have a digital clock on the dresser, and I can look at that clock and tell what time it is. And I want to make sure I have this correct. It's the pattern of the lights in the bars that make a number. So a line, a line, a line, a line. Okay, it's 3. 3:11. That's a pattern that I'm seeing. So those lights and those bars and all that stuff has to go together in a certain way for me to recognize what time it is.
Yes. So the lights are a pattern.
Right.
And their arrangement, those are a pattern. And then you have to understand what that pattern is. Yeah. What time it is. I mean, you
Right.
assign meaning to that pattern.
So that's not a schema for telling time.
Well, yeah,
okay,
it is too. It is. It's like, and schemas, this isn't the a sole definition or the only definition, but like schemas are groups of patterns to help you understand events.
Oh, that's helpful. Okay. That helped to.
But they still use patterns, and patterns still go with it. So they're hard to separate out the two. But it's
right. But if a schema is a group of or patterns grouped together to help me understand something, that definition is very helpful. Okay. So then I look at the clock and it's 6:30. I know that it's in the morning, not in the PM. So it's time for me to get up. I get up, I get dressed, I walk down the hall, and I see a pattern of the human being, and I know that it's my wife. But I'm also looking when she was up before me. I get up when I see her, the way that her face is, I can tell whether she's happy to see me or not, based on what, right? Like, that is telling me
whether she's had her cup of coffee or not.
Usually it's just, oh God, you're still here. But no, in all sincerity, it's usually, I'm usually greeted with a smile, but whatever that is telling me how then I got to figure out how I'm supposed to respond to this particular pattern.
Yep.
And wow. Yeah. Okay. So this is starting to make sense to me. It only took us 45 minutes to get there, but I'm starting to understand.
Yeah. And have you ever heard of Gestalt and Gestalt psychology or the Gestaltist? I think it was in the early 1900s. They were German psychologists that came up with the term Gestalt, which kind of defined these like visual patterns that had meaning. and they talked about like the law of pragnance and different things. I'm trying to think, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking back to like when I was teaching Psych 101 or like Psych 130, perception and memory. But Kohler, I know, was one of them. I don't know. There was a group of them, but that's not the point. The point is, because you can look up Gestalt and Gestalt psychology. They were talking about visual cognition, and they didn't call it that at the time. That's what we call it now. But how you recognize visual patterns, and they started with extremely simple patterns. I mean, really simple patterns. So they had like if you like, so Pac-Man, the game where it has the the
Yes.
that eats the little dots. So if you take the Pac-Man and you take four of them and you put them in a group, like in a circle, but you point all their mouths towards a dot right in the middle. Okay, so they're all kind of with their
Hmm.
mouths open, and then you take the dot away, but they're all kind of facing towards the middle. If they're lined up just right, it looks like instead of four Pac-Men, it looks like four circles with a white square resting on top of the circles. And you can't not see that because our brain is built to try to figure out the patterns, and that's the pattern that makes more sense. Not that there's four Pac-Men laying just right, but there are these circles with a square on top of it because depth perception, we see things that occlude other things. Or um, like if you take the greater than and less than sign,
Hmm.
if you put their noses together where they touch,
Hmm.
that looks
Okay.
like so that's an X.
That's an X. Yeah.
But we don't see that as a greater sign and less than sign with their noses touching. We see them as two lines, one laying on top of the other. So
Right.
it's because that's kind of the law of continuation or continuity. You it doesn't make sense in nature for something to go and then make a hard turn if it could keep going straight like that line.
Okay.
And so there's different, and then you can group things, like you can put dots together if they're you see them based on proximity, how close they are together, or on shape or size. There's a lot of those different laws. It's showing that our brain is already, I think the point they were making is the brain is pre-wired to see patterns in the world. It's not it's trying to figure out what the pattern is. And so
Oh,
that's a really cool
is this
example of it.
is this why we see shapes in the clouds?
Yeah,
When
no,
you look at a
that's another
cloud and you're
example.
like, "Oh, that
Absolutely.
looks like a dog," is because
Absolutely.
your brain is trying so hard to find the pattern.
Which is meaning, right? It's trying to find meaning to this stimulus. What does it mean to me?
Oh,
And so like the laws of proximity, the laws of continuation, they carry a lot of meaning with them. And when you're seeing a cloud, that has meaning. When you see somebody's face, the pattern of their face, that has meaning. Are they angry? Are they happy? And I don't know. With our dogs, I probably shouldn't admit this. I don't do this often because it's but I'll notice that they're looking at me. So I'll just get like a really kind of furrowed brows and mean look. And then like they rear up, like open their eyes, like, oh, and then I smile real big, and then they relax. And then I have and I just change my facial expressions back and forth. And then pretty soon they jump up and kind of come running over, like, is everything okay? But they're detecting those patterns too. That has meaning, because if I'm upset, that means something to them. Or if I'm happy, that means something. So and to tell on myself even more, I'm sure a lot of people do this. This isn't just me, I'm sure. But like when Sierra was first born, I found out that you could say, "Hey, Sierra, you are really ugly and stupid. I don't love you anymore." And she would just coo and ha ha. But if I would say, "Sierra, I love you," and she would like primp to start to cry, it wasn't the words, it was
right.
the pattern and the meaning behind the different sounds and things. And that's what our brains really are trying to do, is to pick out patterns so that we have meaning and understanding around our world.
Yeah. So the back to the cloud, back to clouds, or all of this is that not only is it pattern recognition and the brain's just just wanting to find patterns, but we're looking for meaning in those patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think
Yeah.
that's the key element here that we've gotten to, is that not only patterns, but and those patterns are used for schemas to help understand
Mm-hmm.
those patterns, but also what is the meaning behind the pattern? There's something grouped together here in a
Mm-hmm.
particular way. What does that mean to me?
Yep.
How can I use that? Yeah, you were bringing up. This is probably different than patterns, but and there's articles and websites about all of this, but in company logos,
Yeah.
that they're not hidden necessarily, but there's some things in logos that you don't see at first.
Mm-hmm.
But once you learn about them, or once you see them the first time, you can't not see it ever again.
Yeah, exactly. That's also a Gestalt law, the figure ground.
What
You
is
can't
that?
look at the figure and the ground at the same time. You have to see one or the other. And so, because you can't process the two. So, the hourglass, that can either be an hourglass or it can be two faces pointing towards each other. You the visual illusions are amazing. So
This okay.
yeah, but that's one of them. An hourglass, if it's shaped just right, it looks like the silhouette of two faces looking at each other, or you can see the hourglass, and that's the
Oh,
figure ground. Are you seeing the figure, or are you seeing ground? Because the hourglass can be the figure, or it can be the ground behind the two faces, or it can pop out to the top. And then, like maybe shouldn't name companies unless they're sponsoring us, but like
oh no, I think
FedEx,
that's the one
the
that comes to mind. The
yeah,
FedEx. I
has the
never
arrow
saw the
pointing
arrow.
forward.
And
Yeah,
then once it was pointed out to me and I saw the arrow, I can't not see the arrow
can't not
ever
see
again.
it. Yeah,
So I'm driving down the freeway and there's a big white truck with purple and orange writing on the side. And I glance over, I see that arrow like
yeah,
every time. But remembering before it was pointed out to me, I never saw that arrow.
yeah. I don't know
Uh,
what it looks like now, because you know how college conferences and realignments, there's so many universities going from conference to conference. But at
yeah,
one time, the Big Ten had 11 teams in it. So on the Big Ten logo, there was the uh, two number ones in it for 11, for the 11 teams. So it said Big Ten, but there was two ones for the 11. So
yeah.
I mean, people use different groups use it. Can use that fairly in a clever way to get their point. Like FedEx is the arrow's pointing forwards, not backwards. So it's like we're always going forward. We're always delivering, and there's a lot
And
of neat logos like
Amazon,
that.
uh, none of these are sponsors, by the way, folks, but
Yeah,
Amazon uh, in the beginning, well, maybe not the beginning, but at some point, the arrow underneath Amazon, that is now just the arrow. But a while back, it went from the A to the Z. That arrow did.
that's right. I
So,
remember that.
yeah, in the logo, it was everything from A to Z. And they've kind of gone away from that. Now they just have the arrow itself. But, that was this little, kind of like the FedEx example, this little
Yeah,
arrow.
that was a good one.
But I like what you said is going back to, I can't unsee something once I've seen it, is say that again. It's the ground or the
Figure or ground.
figure or ground. I'm gonna have to go look this up to do some more. I want to learn
Yeah,
some more about this, but again, it's all patterns.
yeah. And the reason you can't unsee it is because now you've attached meaning to it, and now that pattern has a specific meaning, and so you can't unsee that again anymore.
Huh. Okay, okay. So
Have
now
you
I
seen
know
the old woman, young woman?
I have.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
that's a figure ground type thing. You
yeah.
can't see them both at the same time. You either see one or you see the other. That's
Is
kind of
there
like
a
the
is there a reason you see one or the other that you know of, or
no. I think that I know that there's, if you go to the internet, they'll try to tell you that there are reasons.
we're back
Can
to
you?
bro science? Are you telling me to use bro science?
I'm telling you that bro science is out there, but
Oh, okay.
there's really not. It's based on experiences you've had and how your brains learn to process patterns over anyway, and that kind of leads you to process it in a certain way. I think it really relates more to how our brains in the past have processed patterns to make meaning out of patterns, which might lead us to see one versus the other initially, like to see the old lady or to see the young woman first versus but then once you understand that people might even have to point out, say, no, the necklace on the young woman is the mouth of the old lady. So then you have to like her hair, that's the nose. And then you go, oh, now I see it. But
But
it's,
when you
but
do
once you
that,
do, yeah,
can you switch back and forth? Can
yes,
you look at that picture and see an old lady and then a young lady?
yeah, yeah. Once you've seen both of them, then
Okay.
you can switch back and forth.
Oh, okay. But that's an on-channel process, right? Where you
Yeah,
go, I want to see the old lady so I
mm-hmm,
know where she is.
mm-hmm. You start trying to. It's an attentional thing. So I
Hmm.
mean, it's just like everything, all parts of the brain are involved in to some degree, but it's mostly on channel that you're trying to see it. Yes.
Yeah, because they have other ones like that. I'm trying to remember um,
Yeah, there's a
the
ton
other
of them.
pictures, but also, boy, I might really be screwing this up. But I was thinking you brought up split brain with the Alan Alda the thing about the. But in that, one of the experiments that Doctor, how do you say his name? Is the doctor in Split Brain?
Oh, Michael Gazaniga.
Gazaniga. But
Gazaniga.
one of the things that they did, they were showing the patient, the guy in the video, they were showing him pictures, um, and in those pictures, he could see the fruit. Do you remember the thing? They were looking at like pictures of a bunch of fruit together, and it was patterned in a way that it looked like a person.
Oh yes, yeah, nice, yeah, yeah.
And
Be-
go ahead.
because there's artwork that will do that. They'll show like caves and trees. You can see a face within it, and it's one side of our brain is better at is where our fusiform face area is, where we can see faces and things, and the other side is more about understanding objects. So like one was a face made up of pineapple and all the different fruits.
Hmm.
And when the split brain patient had to write what they saw versus tell what they saw, one side could see the face and the other couldn't.
But again, going back to patterns, when you look at that artwork, you see you see a bunch of fruit, but I think what we see with our both of our hemispheres attached is we see the face.
Yeah, and maybe you don't see it initially, but you can see it. You probably usually do. It might take a second or two, depending on the artwork itself.
Mm,
Some of them are extremely obvious, and then some you look from it and you go, "Oh, yeah, now I see it." But that's really the same thing as seeing shapes in clouds.
that's where I was
Yeah,
going with that.
yeah,
Is back to the shapes in the cloud thing. Is where the brain is trying to find meaning,
hmm
even when it looks at a piece of art.
hmm
This piece of art. Let's not talk about art because I took 2 semesters of art appreciation and I still don't
Still
understand
don't
what I was looking.
appreciate it.
Still don't appreciate it. But when you're looking at a piece of art designed specifically to do this thing, it's
hmm
actually a bunch of fruit or a bunch of pieces of something, but put together in a way that it represents a pattern that I recognize as a face, as a
Yep.
car, whatever that is.
Even though it's not specifically a face, but it
Right.
resembles that, and you can see the face. Yep.
And then I'm looking for meaning in a pattern, and I see the face.
Well, the face on the moon. People have
Oh,
seen
another
that
good
for
one.
years and talked about it. And
Yeah.
it's you're wanting to understand things and maybe animate things. And yeah, it's just what our brain is wired to do.
Is to detect patterns.
Pull patterns out of things and then try to add meaning and make sense out of that.
And so give me that what you said one more time about schemas and patterns.
So I said that patterns, think of them as as you're taking in information from your sensory systems, visually, auditorily, what you're touching, the haptic and all of that, your brain and the neural networks in your brain are trying to pick out things that they are expecting and that make sense to them. So it's trying to pick out those patterns. So it's almost like the raw stimuli, the raw signal is finding patterns in that. And then when you start stacking those patterns together to make meaning of them, that could be more like a schema. Like if you're putting patterns together around an event, like going into a restaurant to order food, that's like a complex system of patterns to help you know what to do. But
Okay.
they're all kind of tied together, I think.
Yeah, I'm
So
getting that. I'm trying really hard in these episodes to not try to make you isolate a piece or a function of the brain, because I am getting, every time we do this, it's like, well, it's a little bit of patterns, but it also, there's schemas, and patterns form these. So
yeah,
again,
so it would be appropriate to say, I have a schema of what it's like to go into this restaurant and order food.
mhm.
Then it'd also be appropriate to say, I recognize and understand the patterns involved in going in to this restaurant to order food. And some scientists and cognitive psychologists talk more about schemas. And so they use schemas to explain a lot of the things they're talking about. And some use patterns and talk about our pattern recognition system to explain what the brain does. And most of the time they're explaining the same thing. They're just explaining it in a little bit different way, using
Mhm.
schemas or using patterns.
Yeah.
But it's just different ways to understand the brain. I see them as overlapping, but in my mind, I have kind of my definition of what each of them are. But it's not like a definition for the word house. Then you can say, well, that's not a house and that is a house. It's not
Hmm.
that kind of rigid. It's like a dwelling. Could be a lot of different things, maybe. So it's
Yeah.
just it's a in my mind they're fairly interchangeable, but I have a way that I see the differences in them. But that doesn't mean that that's the best way to divide those. I think you're okay just kind of understanding schemas and patterns are really similar.
Well, so not to oversimplify this or to belabor this point, but the fast food restaurant, when I pull into the parking lot, and my brain, I see the information, which is windows around the whole thing. Where the door is, it's usually white, red, and yellow, or
Hmm.
some of those colors. But when I see that pattern, that's not a schema yet. That's the pattern. But in that pattern, I go fast food.
Yeah. So you're trying to get me to do what I just
I
said
know,
you
I
can't
know,
do.
I
I don't.
know. Okay.
I it could be either. Like if you describe that as a pattern, I would say, yeah,
Hmm.
you're right. And if you described it as a schema, I would say, yeah, you're probably right.
Okay.
I
I
don't
knew I
know
was
that
going down this road. I did. I recognized it, but
I don't know there's a way to like find that line to say, here you can always divide it based on this. And
yeah.
that line might be there. So you might talk to somebody, a cognitive scientist that's smarter than I am, which is 98% of all cognitive scientists, talk to them and they would say, oh yeah, here's a dividing line. I
Yeah.
just in all my years, all my readings, all my like how I've wrestled with it and come to think about all these things, I don't see that dividing line. I haven't found a dividing line.
Okay. So you just you just scolded me. I got it. But no, and I'm just kidding. But in all sincerity, I understand what you're saying. That you and I think that it's probably the truth. There isn't a dividing line, or
Mhm.
at least for what I'm talking about. So here's where
Mhm.
I was going, and I'm not
Okay.
trying to press. I want you to hear my thought
Okay.
process, because I know, even though it's wrong, I want you to hear it. Um, but where I was trying to go, and again, I'm a simple creature, and sometimes you can't oversimplify these things. It's just not possible. But I was thinking the patterns of the windows, the lights, and the colors, that pattern represents a fast food establishment, which I have and again, I know I wanted to play this thought out, is I have a schema for how to act at a fast food restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
right? Once I get inside.
Mm-hmm.
So that pattern outside lets me know where I'm at, and that I have a schema for how to behave within the structure of a
Mm-hmm.
fast food restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm trying to draw a line, even though I know that we can't. Does my line of thinking, though, even though wrong, make sense where I was trying to go?
Well, but I'm not saying it's wrong. That might
Oh,
be
I
the
think
line.
it's wrong. I think it's wrong.
That might be the line. But I get what you're saying. Like when the light reflects off of the wall of the building and enters your eye,
Mm-hmm.
and that's physical energy of wavelengths of light is captured and transduced into a neural signal. Your brain sees a pattern of colors of the red, yellow, whatever, and that's a pattern. And maybe that pattern, just a fleeting glimpse of it, wouldn't be enough to activate a schema about fast food. So you would need some additional patterns to then activate your schema.
I go through the door,
Mm-hmm.
and once in the door, to my right is a counter
Mm-hmm.
with cash registers, a person behind it wearing a uniform, and behind that, thank you for letting me play this out, by the way, John. That sincerely, thank you. There's a menu behind them. That is another pattern
Mm-hmm.
that I recognize,
Mm-hmm.
and go, I have a schema for this. I
Yeah,
know that I pay before I get my food.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take my food back to a table, right? Like that. I have a schema for how to operate here.
So I didn't let you play it out far enough, maybe, because what you're saying now, I think is accurate. Just that initial, the color of the building creates a pattern,
Mm-hmm.
but that might not be enough to activate the schema. But then seeing the big windows, that's another pattern. And then seeing the parking lot with some cars, that's another pattern. So now you're starting to say, oh, this might be a fast food restaurant. So now my expectations are when I go in, there's going to be a counter. And so when you go in and see that, you're going, oh yeah, that pattern, because now my back channel is trying to match those patterns. Like when I open this door, oh, that matches. There's a counter. Oh, there's a menu on the wall behind and above the people taking my order. That matches my pattern. So now I'm expecting certain things, and those are all matching, and you just know what to do and what you should do in that situation.
Based on those patterns.
Yeah, based on the patterns. And then if there's something off, like it might still be a fast food restaurant, but I think I told you about this once. I was doing some training down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with the law enforcement academy there, and I went by this restaurant. I was driving from the academy to my hotel, and every time I was coming down this last road right before I turned to go into my hotel, there's just something that was really unsettling. And so it was my back channel. It was just like, and I would go, man, there's something wrong here. And I was always like looking around and couldn't figure it out. And one day it just hit me, and I'm like, why didn't I see this immediately? Because right before I turned off to the right was a restaurant, and it was called the Big Biscuit Breakfast or something like that was the name of it.
Okay.
And it was in this building that kind of looked like it, not a fast food, but it was smaller building like that and kind of square like that. Like maybe at one time it was a fast food restaurant, but the roof was sloped really strange. It wasn't an angle. It was a curved slope that came out, and it had designs at the end with stuff hanging off. And it had I can't even think how to describe this, but it was like layers of things built on top of each other, kind of like standing out all around it. And it had like almost looked like a dragon insignia in it. And it was dark brown, and it was red and gold designs around it. And it looked just like a Chinese restaurant. Like you could go in there and get Chinese food. And it said the Big Biscuit Breakfast Cafe or something like that.
Right.
And that was such a mismatch that every time I was driving, and that's the only thing I can figure, because once I saw it, it's like, that's what's been bothering me. Then it didn't bother me after that because I kind of knew what it was. But it was that mismatch of patterns and schemas of that's Chinese restaurant that's called the Big Biscuit Breakfast, which sounds like that's not Chinese. So you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
It did not match. So if your expectations are one way and something doesn't match, then you're going to know that as well. If you walk into a fast food restaurant and there's not a counter, you're like, whoa, something's wrong. And then you find out they're doing it a little bit differently or something, but you still get that this isn't matching up. But as long as things are matching and there's that counter, and so you don't really think about it, you know what to do.
So you're proposing that we conduct research in a fast food restaurant, but when you walk in, everything on the outside is the same, but when you walk in, there's a maitre d' behind
That
a
that would throw people off. That would be
what?
fun to see what people do when they walk in.
Yeah, just to measure people's
How
reaction when
many?
they
How
walk in.
many today? 3 of you? Let me go seat you over there. And
That's
then they seat you, and then you walk up and get.
and then you walk up and you order.
Yeah,
That's I love it. I love it. That's no. I don't want to scare you or anybody else, but I feel like I might be learning. So
good.
this is it's starting
Good.
to somewhat make sense. Somewhat.
That's good because next week is an exam over the first 14 episodes or whatever.
Oh no, I'm
No,
going
I'm
to
kidding.
fail miserably, horribly. I'm still taking the win. I remembered 4 out of 5 of the words
was
I used a
awesome.
month ago.
That was awesome.
So
I remembered
I'm
1 out of 5. So no,
I'm really
that's
happy with
good.
that. Well, thank you, John. That information for me, at least, is I don't know that it's going to change my my binging of TV shows at all, but it makes sense. It makes more sense. So I really appreciate that.
Good. That's great.
Thank you for your time as always,
Absolutely.
and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks,
See you
John.
next week.
Okay. And that brings us to the end of another fascinating discussion here on John Teaches Sean About His Brain. I hope you found today's information as insightful as I did. If you're intrigued by what you heard today and you want to dive deeper, I encourage you to go back and listen to our previous episodes where John has laid all the groundwork for so many of these concepts. We're always looking to continue this journey of understanding our brains together. So if you have any questions about the topics we've covered, or if there's any brain-related mystery you'd like us to try to unravel, we'd love to hear from you. You can connect with us on our social media channels. All the details are in the show notes below. Let us know your thoughts, share your insights, and hey, maybe your question will be featured in a future episode. If you like this episode, tell a friend, a coworker, a family member. And if you love this episode, tell 2. Finally, if you're enjoying John Teaches Sean About His Brain, finding these conversations helpful, please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. With your help, we can continue on this path and work together to make incredible discoveries about the human brain. Thank you.